I think the moment that Loki escaped with the Tesseract in Endgame got us all excited for what was to come. The possibilities, the splits in the timelines, what was this Loki gonna get up to? Well, now having seen the finale of the first season of Loki on Disney+, I for one can say that it didn't disappoint. Having said that, I will be the first to admit, it caught me off guard, the style of this show. I didn't know what to expect going in. I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the comic books, but what regular viewers of this channel will know, I have a love for time travel, so my expectations were high. Before we get into the meat and bones of the review, why not subscribe to the Culture Cave? We have loads of TV and film content. Thanks very much. The TV series Loki is the newest story in the behemoth that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it features Tom Hiddleston reprising his role as Loki, as well as Owen Wilson as Mobius, Sophia DiMartino as Sylvie, Gugu Mbatha-Raw as Judge Renslayer, and it even has a cameo from Richard E. Grant. The show starts with Loki being taken to the Time Variance Authority, or the TVA for cool cats and kittens like us. Here, Loki learns that he's a variant who most likely is going to get pruned, i.e. sent to non-existence. Well, at least that's our understanding at the beginning anyway. He then finds out that there are other variant Lokis who are causing problems and making the timeline diverge. This starts what could only be described as a roller coaster through time of Loki trying to find a way for him to exist, but also to try and find answers as to what's going on with this sacred timeline. Overall, I love this show. I love the balance between the human moments and the character development of Loki, as well as the sci-fi timeline stuff going on. This series, more so than WandaVision and the Falcon and Winter Soldier, felt to me like the beginning of something new. I mean, sure, we have a new Captain America now, and I really love that series too, and yes, that will be interesting going forward, but this series, Loki, felt like it was putting the chess pieces in place for the next phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like the arc of the Infinity Stones in the previous phases, this multiverse theme seems to be the big setup for this phase. We also have Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness coming out. This could lead perfectly into that. So yeah, color me excited for the next phase. Having said all that big stuff, an aspect of Loki which really kept me engaged was the production design. At times it even felt a little Wes Anderson, really stylized and individual. Although at the same time, still feeling part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was a fantastic job on their part, and it's a world that I'm looking forward to spending more time in the next season of Loki, which has been confirmed. The character development of Loki himself was really well done. This is a character who's been a bad guy in more films than he's been a good guy. And yes, he's also had his own redemptive arc, to the point where when he died in Infinity War at the hands of Thanos, we all wept for him. He has already garnered a lot of empathy for us. Having said that, this version of Loki isn't the same Loki. This is right after the battle in the first Avengers of New York. He's still a bad guy here. He hasn't went through his redemptive arc yet. Although, as an audience, we have already been on that journey with this character, and therefore they were able to fast track his redemptive arc. And yes, there were moments in Loki where we weren't quite sure if he was still just out for himself and he wanted to be mischievous, but most of the time, we were on this character's side. He was the true good guy on our side of this series, which couldn't have been done if the previous Loki hadn't already been redeemed in our eyes. And this is actually a good place to say, where we came into this show as an audience, having seen all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe so far, I would love to be a non-Marvel watcher to see what they think of this series on its own, because I took a lot into it. I knew who Loki was, I had empathy for him, I knew about the Battle of New York, I knew about everything that he was going to go on and do in his life before he was split off in his timeline in Endgame. I mean, I'm sure non-Marvel watchers would love the show, because there's a lot in there that is individual to the show. Having said that, I'm really enjoying getting to feel what it's like to be a comic book reader. I mentioned earlier I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge, but I can imagine how it feels to have an encyclopedic knowledge of the comic books now, because Marvel is doing such a good job of weaving these stories together, creating side stories in the same universes. It's really enjoyable as a non-comic book reader to feel what it must be like to be a comic book reader, and thank you Marvel for giving me that. The character of Sylvie, played by Sophia DiMartino, was a great counterweight to Tom Hiddleston's Loki. The chemistry for the pair was off the charts. I loved how insular the character was. She really felt like someone who'd been on the run for however many years she had been. I was a huge fan of the culmination of their storylines. Whenever Loki says, "You can't trust anyone and I can't be trusted," I thought that was a brilliant way to sum up their relationship and how they are counterweights to one another. I also thought it was funny, but also made complete sense that Loki would fall in love with himself. I know that joke's probably been made 100 times on the internet already, but it makes so much sense. But also, it's not just an egotistical thing. It was believable. It was a believable relationship, and they actually did seem to have a lot of chemistry, as I said before. But it is pretty funny. He fell in love with himself. Speaking of relationships, Owen Wilson's Mobius and Gugu Mbatha-Raw's Ravonna Renslayer had a really interesting relationship as well. Who would have ever thought the casting of these two actors would work so well? They had such a believable friendship that whenever it crumbles, I felt genuine empathy for Mobius, and I was so happy to see him come back in episode 5. Now, as for the time travel, I've done a few videos on this channel where I'm really picking apart film and TV shows' time travel. I will say that the time travel for this is not as intellectual as some other things, for example Primer or Dark. Having said that, I thought the way that they represented it worked perfectly for the story. I liked the visual of the timeline and then the Nexus events taking it over the red line. I thought that that was really interesting. I also thought it added to the understanding that the audience could gain, especially when you're doing these bureaucratic authoritarian regimes. Sometimes it's quite difficult to not have it be very, very dialogue heavy, but with those visual cues of what was happening, it really helped the understanding cement in straight away, and I really, really thought that was a great thing to do. As for the end of the show, here's my thoughts. We interrupt this program for a correction on my part. I didn't know who Kang the Conqueror was. I had no idea. So bear that in mind when you're listening to the end of this video. Everything I say is still relevant, and I think it is still correct in my own opinion, like my take on the show. I don't think I changed my opinion on the show. Having said that, I now know who Kang the Conqueror is, and rather than making me change the opinion of this show, it makes me so much more excited for the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I think it's going to be great, having since watched a few videos on who is Kang the Conqueror. Having said that now, I can't wait to talk to my friend Emmett on Saturday. We're going to have a Loki discussion, because he's really, really into the comic books, and I'm sure he'll educate me on all that, and I can't wait. But just bear that in mind when you're watching the rest of this video. Thanks. The whole way through, I honestly thought we were going to get to the end, and we'd find out that Loki himself was actually the one in charge. Now, that didn't happen, and I will admit, when it was revealed the one who remains is the one in charge and we met him, I was a little underwhelmed, and they knew that maybe we would be because they even made the joke. Interestingly, although I was a little let down by this being the guy in charge, because I thought it was going to be something so much more mind-bending, I love the actor choice. Jonathan Majors is absolutely a fantastic young actor. I loved him in The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and I think he did a fantastic job with this. Really eccentric, a bit out there, and by the end of the episode, I was fully on board with where it was going. Especially knowing that there's a season 2 now, it makes complete sense for this to be the way it ended. I was expecting the multiverse to be disrupted again, and the potential of a multiversal war coming back. I expected that 100%. That has to be where the phases are going. I really enjoyed as well the idea of him giving them the choice. I thought that was a really cool spin on it. And yes, I was expecting the one final twist that the two Lokis, Sylvie and Loki, were not going to end on good terms in this series. What the end of Loki shows is that sometimes it's better not to subvert expectations. I think what happened at the end was not a twist. They said that there was someone behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz references were there the whole time, and guess what? There was someone behind the curtain pulling the strings. In fact, it wasn't even really a reveal at all. The only difference is it wasn't the 3, it was 1. And whenever he was explaining what had happened, most of the description of what he was saying, his real story was actually similar to the narrative that the TVA had, with a few key differences. For example, they're all variants, I don't know that, but still, it was very similar to the story we already knew. So this show did not subvert expectations. Having said that, it actually maybe shows you that because subverting expectations is done so often these days, the fact that they didn't is kind of subverting our expectation of our expectations being subverted. Whew, that was hard to say. Right, last thing I wanted to mention is, at the very end, Loki goes back to the TVA, he sees Mobius there, he sees B-15, and he goes up and says to them, listen, I found the one who remains, and he gets nothing from them. It's that moment we realize we're in a different universe, and the scope of Season 2 looks huge now. Can't wait to find out what's up with this second TVA, why this one who remains decided to be the face of this TVA. So many questions, and I can't wait. Did you guys love Loki? Let me know in the comments. Was there something you think could have been improved? Are you looking forward to Season 2? Are you looking forward to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in general now? Let me know. I would love to know your thoughts. Give the video a like if you liked it. I will say, me and my friend Emmett are going to be doing a Loki discussion this Saturday, so please tune in for that. Emmett is our resident comic book expert here in the Culture Cave, so I'm sure he has a lot of information to give out to me there. So thanks very much for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next video. See you later.